Great. Well, we get to really set the stage and the themes here. Have some of the top investors in AI, two New York-based and one made the trek out from California. I guess I just want to start with like the disillusionment level with the valuations of foundation models, or where are we in the sort of excitement about foundation models and the general intelligence getting better and more sophisticated versus the infrastructure build out versus like applications both for consumer and enterprise and stuff actually getting built that people are using. Shardul, I'll start with you. Like where are you investing the most? Where are you most excited to put money, and where do you think the value will accrue?
Yeah, let's start with a little bit more of an optimistic tone. I think it's summertime, you know?
That's what the VCs are for?
Yeah, the sun is shining. I think, you know, in each of the three layers, we talk about foundation models, infrastructure, kind of picks and shovels, as well as applications. Recently, we invested in both Mistral and Cohere at early stages, and they've had terrific financings recently. In infrastructure, we're early investors in Scale, and they raised $1 billion very recently. And in applications, we've invested in new companies like DeepL or Augment as applications. So let's start without disillusionment and acknowledge
everything's good.
That it's summertime.
All good.
Vince?
I kind of agree that I mean, certainly there's a lot of hype, but it should be followed with the fact that like this is one of, every investor asks for these massive paradigm shifts. We got one, and so I expect with accelerating change for people to price that very quickly and probably overshoot. Are we at peak? I don't know, but frankly, I don't care, because if you're focused on problems and problems obsessed as a founder, I think time's on your side and you can build even if we go into some lull for valuations. To me, on the foundation models apps, the vast majority of founders should not be working on a foundation model. So for my time spent, it's almost all application layer, because why would you try to compete with the big tech companies, OpenAI, Anthropic, and so on? I think it's a hard thing to do. And so most of the companies and founders that I spend time with are application-oriented.
You made the bet on OpenAI, and now you're like, okay, applications.
No, I think there will be a ton of competition in the foundation model. Like, we're seeing that. You guys just invested in a company. OpenAI is competing. The big tech companies are spending billions of dollars. Facebook, which we talked about beforehand, we try to back category-defining companies, and so if we find it, we like to be very concentrated in people and ideas. And this concept of OpenAI being the company that everyone's chasing, I think we think is warranted, because they're leading the curve on the foundation frontier. Will there be opportunities behind that with smaller models and stuff that runs on device and so forth? Yes, of course. But for us, we have our big bet in OpenAI on the model layer, and I think we feel very good about it.
Sarah, do you think Llama and the open source competition and the proliferation of models? Yeah, I don't know. How's that impacting your investment strategy, and where are you targeting your firepower?
If you look at what Llama and Mistral, we're also backers here, have done for the ecosystem, it's dramatically changed the competitive environment, and then what's possible in terms of like what entrepreneurs can work with to create value in different layers of the stack. And so I think it's hugely like aperture opening for the ecosystem. Like if I take your first question, like my overall framework is, does it matter, right? What kind of value creation is going to happen, and then at what layer? And then within that, like, which specific players, right? Simplest framework in the world, but I think if you look at the aggregate, like, are people going to make money putting hundreds of millions of dollars into every handful of researchers who worked at a large lab and have skilled models? Like, I do not think so, right? I mean, we might hopefully choose a few interesting ones, and I think OpenAI is the most interesting company that has appeared in the last decade.
Because it's an application, or because it's a foundation model?
Well, I mean, I think one of our theses is in this period of time when the capability advancement's happening so quickly, that's often tied in companies. So we do have companies doing a lot of applied research, but I think what open source has done has made the consumer-facing piece of OpenAI a much better business than the developer-facing piece.
But Eric, if I may.
Yeah. I love to be disagreed.
Yeah, I think it's the wrong question. It's super interesting.
Yeah.
because it's so seductive to opine about where does value accrue in the market. And, but it's absolutely the wrong question. The reason Vince and Sarah, and there's other great investors in the room like Grady, the reason they're terrific investors is not because they're thematic and they start with this like divination of what's going to happen in the world. It's that they take their craft seriously about assessing founders. And it turns out the companies that will make the most money in the world will be created by founders that people take a view on. In my view, if you're a high-quality decision maker with imagination and have operational excellence, I want to talk to you, and I don't care like what you're working on.
All right, let's try and be
Wait, if I may,
Yeah.
because I appreciate you, and I've known Shardul for a decade, and I think he's a great investor. But I did make a pretty thematic bet. I think this is the like super cycle of our generation and technology, and I think there are a few things that are a little different now, right? So one thing we look for in founders, besides all the great entrepreneurial traits that you talk about, is like, do we agree with your prediction about what's going to happen from a capability perspective? Because if you are working on things that other like very well-resourced, very talent-rich companies are that we think are going to get run over in the next 6 to 18 months, I'm not interested, actually. Like, I think that's a core trait you need to have in this technical environment.
Yeah, and if I can explain the difference, I'm just like an average guy. I'm not as intelligent as Sarah, and as a consequence, I really try to listen hard to what the entrepreneur views as inevitable in the world versus what I think. And I think the danger that we see in our partnership, like, why did we miss OpenAI if we're like being vulnerable on stage and really sharing? Like all of the mistakes, if I take all the mistakes Index has made, probably...
Wait, so why did you miss?
80% are because we overthought things, right? Like, it's a high intelligence industry, and so we try to double down on that strength and really think through and imagine the future. And it turns out sometimes the most important decisions are relatively simple. And so we've been at risk of overthinking and predicting what's the future, what's the nature of the business model, how do gross margins evolve, and like not just listening to the founder or market traction or other really important signals.
Very specific question. Application with generative AI that you're most excited about, most likely to drive a lot of value and be super, super adopted soon? Like, what use case are you most excited about?
I think the use case I think that I look at and it's clearly has product market fit is basically ChatGPT. And so when we think about the startups, leaning into that has been actually a very winning strategy. Everyone talks about Harvey, I guess call it Pat again in the room, Harvey as an amazing company, but also there's one in financial analysts called Rogo. Glean added like chat with your PDF kind of things with your ChatGPT, like Sierra on the customer service side. This concept that you're going to have a more personified piece of software that you can chat or communicate back and forth with, I think is the use case to me that stands out to lean into. It's more of a wedge than what this might look like in 10 years from now. But this is why I think
You think people like this sort of blank text box, though? I feel like there's this question of whether you need to lead sort of the user to want more.
Google search is a blank text box, and that seems to be doing pretty well. ChatGPT is a blank text box. It's the largest AI application. So personally, that's why going back to, are we intelligent and trying to over-predict the market? I don't know, but it is working, and consumers are engaging at a very high rate in it, and so therefore, why should I question that and more embrace that as the technology of the future?
Sarah, application you're most bullish on?
I think that the shape of applications that are really attractive right now, they don't look like the traditional enterprise software categories, right? Like ChatGPT, this is not a category before. Enterprise search in the form of like Glean, amazing company, like wasn't an important category before. And so some of the things that we're most interested in, like we are examples in this, investors in this company called HeyGen along with Vince. And what they're really attacking is video production, right? And so if anybody said like video production, like everything from the videographer to the staffing to the editing, like that's an application that just doesn't look like the shape of companies from 5-10 years ago.
HeyGen just announced a big funding round. What is the thesis? I think people will be curious about it right now.
I think the thesis is that the number one job that people want in the world as kids growing up now is to be a video influencer. What?
So sad.
Educator, communicator. But I use it as an example of like everybody understands that video is an incredibly powerful communication medium. And then if you ask most people, like, do you want to go pay thousands of dollars to be in a studio to communicate for your business? Like, the answer is no, right? And so if you can take that down by cost 2 orders of magnitude and just generate videos in whatever form you want, infinitely every language, like, it'll be useful.
But I also think this is a good example of OpenAI has technology, Sora, video production. Like, they are going to work on that, and it's on the path to AGI for a bunch of reasons. There's a lot that has to happen between that model and a business or prosumer or consumer adopting it and getting something really good out of it. That's the opportunity for founders. And Joshua Hagen is amazing, and he's going to have to ship a lot of product to stay where he is. So you can't stay still and build one thing and just tune it for a long time. But like, that is a big opportunity, and you can coexist with a big model company. I don't think you're just going to get killed, in a year from now.
Shardul, an application.
16 years ago when I started at Index, I tried to introduce my partners to a fashion company in Italy. And they're like, dude, we like your sneakers, but you don't have a sense of style. So I'm not a consumer investor at all. However, I do kind of have an appreciation for the enterprise. When I think about the enterprise, one of the top 3 use cases for AI is code generation.
Yeah, code generation. I thought that would be the answer. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, that's my answer.
Yeah.
You give me the pitch. Why code gen?
Well, I just think developers are most comfortable using code. It's clearly, we're seeing it with Copilot, but you're the expert.
Well, I think there's lots of reasons, to your point. Technically, document generation, document interpretation is something that models are really good at. But let's just look at the commercial stats, right? GitHub Copilot has grown to over 100 million of ARR in a very short period of time. So like, don't ignore demand. As a consequence, it's not surprising that almost every week we've seen a new company emerge, and to your earlier point, at really high valuations because of the expectation of the market opportunity. We took a view on a team that we thought had the right composition of DNA in terms of pragmatic research, domain expertise.
Is that Augment?
And product, yeah, that's Augment. But it's an enormous field, and there could be multiple winners.
All right, so I mean, everything's moving so fast. Like, yeah, give us sort of a view on where things will be in 6 months. I mean, I'm curious, like, the Llama threat. You're an OpenAI investor. Like, how do you think Llama's development is shaping how things are going to look over the next 6 to 12 months?
It's an interesting question, because I think on this open source, closed source debate, people are trying to make it this holy war where you have to pick a side. And to me, the question is, how do you fund the open source side? Because you need a lot of compute. And so Zuck has now come out and basically said, we're going to fund it and open source it. He did an interview, I think, a month ago, 2 months ago, where to me, he telegraphed that he probably or likely will close source if the big model is the product. And so I think over the next year, we're going to get an answer to that. And it'll be an interesting question of, like, at the frontier, will there be open source models from something like Llama? I think no doubt the smaller models, the more open source stuff has enabled a lot of entrepreneurs to be reinvigorated, that you're not just big tech or startups don't have room to exist. And so I think over the next 6 to 12 months, my view is there is an opportunity to go create the next $100 billion company, probably a consumer company. And so if you're a founder and you're problem obsessed, you can now start to take a lot of these capabilities, the multimodal stuff that OpenAI put out recently, and create new experiences. To me, I think we're going to see a lot more of that, because we're now a year into people really tinkering and experimenting, and there's a lot more scale to take advantage of to push these things into market. And so I think over the next 6 to 12 months, we're going to see something break out like that. I don't know what company it is, but I wouldn't be surprised if we're talking about that.
Sarah, a prediction next 6 to 12 months? I mean, one area I'm curious about is sort of how much you think the intelligence of the models is going to continue to improve, but open to sort of any direction where you have a thought.
Yeah, in the next 6 to 12 months is easier because, like, I think there's enough appetite in the overall capital markets to support one generation of training, of just scaling, right, which is not very risky. I think as you get beyond that, it's actually a really interesting time, which is, I think, more open field, because you start to get beyond like $10 billion of CapEx.
Right.
And you run into like more physical world problems, like the data centers, like where's your, do you have enough power going to them? You have to actually construct new plant. At that point, all the large labs are now working on a wide range of different techniques around essentially like systems around models. I think this is interesting because it's like more divergent than everybody chasing the same thing. And so I think we're going to see a lot of improvement in reasoning. It is summer. I think beyond that, it's pretty open.
Prediction?
I'm going to resist predictions. Like, that's not my business.
Isn't that you have to see the future?
I think, look, we're not going to hit a data wall that's like in 6 to 12 months. What I hope for,
Sorry, we're not going to hit a data wall,
in 6 to
therefore
12
the
months.
models will get smarter.
Yeah, in the next 6 to 12 months. Beyond that, like 2027, 2029, maybe, and unless you see some kind of breakthroughs in synthetic data or otherwise. Which I think is a really interesting, again, question to opine over a glass of wine with Vince. The idealist
one of
in
you
me.
is pro-synthetic data and one's not? Or?
No, he's just more fun with wine.
Next time, all right, we'll get everybody drunk, yeah.
He doesn't have to be drunk to be fun.
Put us at the end of the day panel, Eric.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We're just trying to keep it spicy. The idealist in me hopes, maybe not predicts, but hopes that in the context of safety, which I think is really critical in AI, open source can play a really critical role when you have kind of more of a community involved in both qualifying and policing a system. I think that could be really beneficial to our society.
For the two New Yorkers, what do you think distinguishes New York and AI? I lived in San Francisco for 6 years. I feel like we went through the pandemic period and so much of Silicon Valley was online. In a lot of ways, I can be sort of, I don't know, it's all one place. Everybody's flying around. Do you see something unique about the New York opportunity in AI?
I don't know about AI. I mean, I've spent my entire career in New York. We've invested in lots of companies outside of New York. I think one of the great things about this city is it's so multicultural. No one thing dominates New York. And that allows you to have a different level of focus than being, I love the Valley too, and I think it's a great place for innovation, but to me it's more like the clean room where technology exists, and New York is this more, you're in the real world, you have to be multidisciplinary. I was with some of the NYU folks a few weeks ago, and one really fascinating property of this city is the NYU Langone Health System has almost a perfect representation of global demographic data because of how multicultural New York City is. And so they leverage that for how they do AI research. Again, I don't know that'll make New York special versus anywhere else, but it highlights how this city, I think, is just a little different than the Valley where a lot of this is taken place.
You're like, we need data, it's big, we've got everybody. Yeah.
Well, or if you think about synthetic data, these like, where can you get a microcosm of what you need to do for a good deployment?
Yeah.
It could be here.
Yeah, I think the essence of what Vince said really resonates with me. I think that the sun is shining in AI, but it turns out it's a draft for many other industries. New York as a tech ecosystem is probably, 50%? It's almost equal to San Francisco, Bay Area. Bay Area is still number one, but New York is catching up. When we did an analysis of Series A companies in New York, 25% are in healthcare. And so we're seeing healthcare, exactly to Vince's point, being a beneficiary of AI. We're seeing industries like security benefit from AI, not only because there's more compute and data, but for a moment, think about email. Everybody here has probably at once in the last 5 years received a random email that has bad grammar, bad syntax that asks you for your credit card information, right? That Russian criminal is now putting that same email through OpenAI's favorite model to have good grammar, good syntax. And so reachability.
I thought you were the optimist.
Well, security.
I'm getting to the solution. It's called Sublime. Of course I'm talking my book. But the point is the reachability of security threats has increased. And as a consequence, old industries like email security, where there have been public companies like Mimecast and Proofpoint and great private companies like Abnormal, I think are also seeing a really significant shift. So I think the benefit of New York, which is so fragmented across disciplines, domains, and even ethnicities, there can be an interesting draft that benefits all.
All right, we have like 15 seconds. 2 companies outside of your portfolio in AI that you're most bullish on.
Suno, Mikey's coming up next, I think. I think just the idea of building a $100 billion consumer company, to me, I'm obsessed with it, and I think this music stuff is really fascinating. The other one, Sierra, Brett Taylor's company, I think the again, customer support chatbot, people say, is obviously big customer support market, but to me, what's interesting about Sierra is if you take the cost of servicing a customer down to basically 0, how will you change how customers engage with businesses? That is compelling.
Sarah?
I mean, just to give a hat tip to Shardul's point of view and his portfolio, I guess. Yeah, I think Suno's a really interesting company. Mikey's here somewhere, and it's one where I perhaps overthought. I tend to worry about things that I think are really cool. Like, I enjoy music, I play music, and I was like, oh, people don't generally make money in music, and the answer is actually markets can change all the time, and it's like, bet on the entrepreneur. So I think that's a really great business. I wish I was an investor. Hi, Mikey. And
Quickly.
Wiz. Wiz is an amazing company.
Okay.
Yeah.
Shardul?
Brett Taylor. I don't care about
Sierra.
customer support. Brett Taylor.
A person.
Incredible decision maker, extremely imaginative, pragmatic application of research, like what they're doing in benchmarking is super interesting.
Shardul, Sarah, Vince, thank you so much for setting the stage.
Thank you.
Having
All right.
us.